That's all right. Perfect, thank you. I declare open this public hearing of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Resources, inquiry into food and beverage manufacturing in Australia. I acknowledge that where we meet today is the traditional land of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. In accordance with the committee's resolution, this hearing will be broadcast on the Parliament's website, and proof and official transcripts of proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. I also remind members of the media who may be present or listening on the web of the need to fairly and accurately report the proceedings of the committee. So I now call the witnesses from Food Standards Australia and New Zealand, and I welcome representatives from Fsanz. For the Hansard record, could you please each state your full name and the capacity in which you appear?
Dr. Sandra Cuthbert, the Chief Executive Officer of Food Standards Australia and New Zealand.
Dr. Matthew Omerlane, General Manager, Risk Management and Intelligence.
And Crystal Lemus, General Manager of Science and Risk Assessment.
Terrific, thank you. Would you care to make any brief or any opening remarks before we proceed to questions?
Yes. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee today. As stated, I'm Dr. Sandra Cuthbert, the Chief Executive of Fsanz, as it's commonly known. I'm joined by Dr. Matt O'Mullane, our General Manager of Risk Management and Intelligence, and Ms. Crystal Lemus, General Manager of Science and Risk Assessment. We're pleased to be able to contribute to this important inquiry as a keystone agency in the joint food regulation system which serves Australia and New Zealand. Fsanz is an independent statutory authority within the Australian Government health portfolio. Our mandate is to protect public health and safety by working with food regulatory system partners to ensure a safe food supply and well-informed consumers. Our core functions are to develop evidence-based food standards for regulators and industry, monitor the safety of the food supply, support consumers to make informed choices, and coordinate food incidents and recalls in Australia. The work of Fsanz cuts across health, agriculture, industry and trade portfolios, and a safe food supply is essential for a healthy population, a strong domestic economy, and access to international markets. It also underpins consumer confidence and industry integrity, particularly in the food and beverage manufacturing sector. Fsanz recognises the vital role this sector plays in the Australian economy, providing people with ready access to a wide variety of foods and contributing significantly to employment and exports. We engage with food and beverage manufacturers, retailers and peak bodies across all facets of our work, including through formal committees, public consultations and standards advisory groups. This engagement and our horizon scanning tells us manufacturers and regulators alike are facing similar opportunities and challenges as food systems rapidly evolve. New technologies, globalized supply chains, shifting dietary patterns, and changing consumer preferences are driving innovation and the pursuit of new sources and forms of nutrition. These shifts are happening as food systems face increasing pressures and growing populations, climate change, supply disruptions, diet-related disease, and a changing workforce. Where manufacturers grapple with the impacts of these trends on their business and operations, we seek to understand how they will affect standard setting, food safety, and public health and consumer information needs. Fsanz recognizes a secure food supply means consumers have equitable physical and economic access to sustainably produced, nutritious, and safe food. Food standards and regulations should provide a sound foundation for this outcome, not be a barrier to it. We want to ensure our standards work and food safety functions provide a stable platform on which the food and beverage manufacturing sector can operate and innovate. Food regulation system pathways for setting food standards are designed to accommodate new production technologies and new types of foods or ingredients. In particular, the regulation of foods produced by precision fermentation or the new wave of cell-cultured products are captured within well-established pre-market assessment and standard-setting processes. The timeframes for Fsanz approvals are among the fastest in the world and comparable to other advanced economies, including Canada, Singapore, and the United States. It is important to note that we operate within statutory timeframes, which range from 3, 9, and 12 months, and we meet these almost 100% of the time. Where timeframes are not met, it's usually because the risk assessment is quite complex and the data provided might not be adequate, and we might need more information in order to complete the assessment. We set food standards efficiently to the point where we have international manufacturers coming to Australia for their first approvals to support their applications in other countries. I understand sectoral representatives and submitters to the inquiry have raised a number of matters relating to the work of FSANZ, including approval processes for novel foods, digital labeling technologies like QR codes, harmonization with international standards, and the potential for the FSANZ Act review to streamline processes and reduce costs of applications to change the Food Standards Code. If the committee is amenable, I can cover these points now. Otherwise, we're happy to take questions.
No. Do we want to go questions, or are you happy to have them talk to those points?
Doesn't worry about me, either.
No?
Well, let's hear the points.
Yeah, let's hear. That'll save us up some questions.
All right, so on novel foods, if you're happy, I'll go through them by topic. Yep. So on novel foods, the Novel Food Standards has served us well, as you would be aware. We're currently employing this provision for the Australian first assessment of cell-cultured quail. However, we do need to make sure the Novel Food Standards remain fit for purpose into the future, given we are expecting an increase in ensuring these applications as manufacturers look to bring new products to market. So the use of food technologies such as genetic modification, precision fermentation, and cell culture production methods is growing, as is interest in traditional and alternative foods such as insects, algae, and fungus. We seek to continuously improve our systems and processes to ensure FSANZ is well placed to undertake rigorous assessment of these foods. So, for example, we recently released the second call for submission on our proposed changes to how genetically modified foods are defined in the code, and a new definition of GM food is necessary to ensure regulation keeps pace with new techniques for genetic modification, collectively referred to as new breeding techniques. The proposed new definition will continue to protect public health and safety while providing a clear definition for enforcement purposes, better harmonization with regulatory approaches being adopted around the world, and greater regulatory certainty for industry. So that's on novel foods. On digital technologies, I'll mention that our work to modernize standards goes hand in hand with accommodating new digital technologies. Over the last 2 years, we've been engaging closely with stakeholder groups, including industry, public health, and consumer representatives, to consider approaches to digital transformation in the food regulation, including the Food Standards Code and digital labeling. While there's broad support for digitizing the code, there are mixed views around stakeholder around digital labeling. I do think this has probably changed in the last 12 months, but there were definitely mixed views when we undertook that work. What we heard is the problem that's being addressed must clearly be clearly defined before any further work is undertaken. There's a need to balance the benefits and usability of digital labeling for industry and consumers. The existing on-pack information should be maintained, with digital labeling to provide additional information. There is concern that on- and off-pack labeling could diverge in consistency, quality, and accuracy with compliance and consumer information implications. And equity of access and digital literacy among consumers needs to be factored in. So we absolutely will continue to work with our stakeholders and regulatory partners and international agencies to consider digital labeling options and potential approaches, noting industry is also exploring ways to leverage the technology. On harmonization, we're working really closely with international and national food standard agencies to share expertise in food safety risk assessment and to harmonize standards. FSANZ is recognized globally as an independent and trusted food standards agency with deep regulatory science expertise. Multilateral bodies such as Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Health Organization seek our expertise in the development and review of international codex standards. Right now, FSANZ staff are involved in almost 20 international standards-setting forums as group leads, advisors, participants, or observers. This includes codex forums and working groups covering matters including food additives, food hygiene, food labeling, pesticides, and foods for special dietary purposes. We're also represented on international liaison groups and forums sharing expertise in areas including health claims, novel foods, and food safety science. This work means FSANZ has a strong foundation to harmonize domestic food measures with international standards where appropriate. For example, every year, we run a public process to harmonize maximum residue limits, or MRLs as we affectionately call them, for ag vet chemicals with codex standards and those of other countries or regions. Harmonized MRLs enable imports and exports of agricultural products by ensuring compliance with domestic standards and the requirements for trading partners. Most recently, FSANZ harmonized a range of infant formula regulations with codex enabling and supporting trade and market access for domestic manufacturers. We also work with other countries to share food safety assessments, data, and evidence. For example, we've partnered with the Canadian Food Directorate to share GM food safety assessments, where one agency undertakes the work and provides it with the other. Benefits include reduced duplication, time and resource savings, process improvements, and lower costs for applicants. To date, 2 shared assessments for GM foods have been completed, a third is underway, and a fourth is about to start. Together, standards harmonization and international partnerships deliver broad benefits to the food and beverage manufacturing sector and will continue to be a focus of our work as food system modernization and reform progresses. On the FSANZ Act review, I'll just briefly mention that FSANZ is preparing for those outcomes. This piece of work is being led by the Department of Health and Aged Care, and the review presents an exciting opportunity for Act modernization to support a more mature and integrated food regulatory system. The review contemplates changes to FSANZ's operations and responsibilities, which have the potential to streamline our processes and ensure a broader regulatory system is well placed and fit for purpose into the future. We continue to actively participate in the review process to ensure the agency delivers its core functions while responding to any changes in its operating context and scope of responsibilities. So thank you again for the opportunity to appear before the committee today. As noted, the food and beverage manufacturers and regulators alike are facing a similar set of opportunities and challenges as domestic and global food systems rapidly evolve. As the standard setter for the sector, we're committed to addressing these challenges and capitalizing on opportunities through collaborative approaches and forward-thinking strategies. We look forward to discussing how we can continue to enhance our regulatory approach, support industry growth, and ensure that Australian consumers benefit from safe and high-quality food and beverage products. Thank you.
You did well. You just did one question that I had here you hadn't answered, but other than that, you read everything. So
Fantastic.
I'll just pass on to Michelle. You can go.
Well, I was just going to ask, stakeholders to this inquiry have called for FSANZ to accept food safety assessments from comparable overseas regulators as a means of improving regulatory efficiency. What do you think about such a change?
I can kick off. FSANZ has actually undertaken a lot of work in this area around international standards harmonisation. I think it's important to note that our Act constrains us in some of those areas. So where we're finding efficiencies is in that safety assessment sharing. We are very amenable to looking at this further, and the piece of work that we did in this space was provided to the Department of Health and Aged Care to filter into the Act review to see what could be done further in this space.
Okay.
Just around the label. Oh, sorry, do you want? No, you go.
If I may, Rob, just to follow on from that, I had some mid-sized food processors here last week, and they were expressing frustration at trying to expand into export markets, particularly sort of Vietnam and through Southeast Asia. And so, just following on, is it necessarily your role to harmonise that, or is it trade and DFAT to try and work on a sort of harmonised process of some of these importing countries?
From the food perspective, we can certainly play a role. I mean, usually you would have to meet exporting standards and importing country requirements, so that is more the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries and DFAT to negotiate that, but we can certainly play a role in the harmonisation of standards and getting that consistency within the region.
And from an operational level, is it possible for Australia to sort of take a lead in that sort of harmonisation and working with other countries that might want to import our products?
Yes, it is possible, and we do.
Yeah, okay.
So we very much are a leader in this area, and we undertake capacity building in the region and training in the region around how we can better work together and harmonise our standards for food.
Okay. Sorry to want to pinch Dan's thunder because his guests.
Just around labelling, we've had Cadbury's in, we did a site tour down there, and they spoke about some of the costs involved in changing labelling. So is there a requirement for FSANZ to consider the cost and the lead times when doing that? And does industry have a seat at the table? How do they participate in this? Because I think they were talking about $700,000 over their 700 product range. Like, that is a lot of money, and I've heard reports of $1 billion in labelling changes. Like, every time a labelling change occurs, it costs a lot of money to industry. So what do you think about when you're looking at labelling changes, and how often do they occur?
I might take that one if I may. So just to sort of go back to the actual pathways for setting standards, they're very open and transparent. There are opportunities for public consultation where any stakeholders can participate and provide their views on the direction that we're heading. We also have a number of significant industry committee groups that we meet with on a fairly regular basis, and they're certainly forthcoming with concerns around the cost of potential labelling changes. We do have a requirement under our Act to undertake cost-benefit analysis, so impacts on industry, so that's a routine part of the standard setting process, and we consult on our assessments in that space as well. And certainly where, there are outcomes that may be, we certainly look at the sequencing of outcomes to minimise the impact on industry if that's at all possible.
And what about QR codes? I think by the end of 2027, global manufacturers are moving towards QR codes. You spoke about some challenges or concerns around QR code labelling. Can you expand a little bit on that?
It's an area that I think is being predominantly led through industry, and so we're remaining fairly closely in touch with them to kind of see how that progresses. But really, as Dr. Sandra Cuthbert said, we're looking closely at that whole area of QR codes and digital labelling. There's a lot of change, a lot of innovation going on there, and we're sort of looking carefully and closely, but waiting to get that feedback from industry to see how we then need to change, particularly the code and the legislation, because that's kind of what drives the requirements.
Yeah, because one of the things we've spoken about, like, there is a lot of information on labels these days, and it seems to be, maybe it's my age, but it seems to be getting smaller and smaller. So how do you balance that, and how do you engage with industry around the requirements? And there are a lot of really good reasons to have a lot of this information on there, but the cost, how often do these sort of labelling changes occur?
Quite a few points in that.
Yeah, sorry.
But I'll expand to say that not only do we speak with industry and get a good understanding of what the lead time should be so that they can package in bulk any different changes that happen through their regulations, through their labelling, either be it because they've changed ingredients or where things are coming from, or I think the comment was made about red cycle labelling needing to change as well. So we absolutely consider that, but we also work with other government agencies to see if we can align timing across. So we bring together various government agencies into these forums that Dr. O'Mullane was talking about, so that we can talk to industry groups collectively to say these are the various changes that are coming, how can we better support you? So a lot of our transition periods can be up to 5 years to allow for the batching so that there's one change. But the cost of label changes are absolutely considered in our processes. And on the QR code aspect of what you're asking about, I think it's something that is getting a lot of attention, a lot of interest right now. So again, it needs to be a considered discussion with a variety of different government regulators that we're starting the conversation on, to figure out, well, what should be on packages versus what could be on a QR code. And then the question of who owns the portal to where that QR code takes you to, how is that, what's the governance arrangements around that? There's a lot of questions that need to be worked through.
Yeah, because they were saying too with supply chains, sometimes it's difficult to obtain certain ingredients, so ingredients change, and how do you do that really quickly? Yeah, there's certainly a lot of challenges, and it seems that they are very costly, and how can we maybe do that better? Yeah.
And lots of benefits could come out of the QR code in addition to these extra pieces of information.
You have a QR code, you click on it, it says, yep, contains nuts. So if you register, say you register as a celiac, you click on the QR and it just goes bang, big red light or something comes up saying don't touch. Yeah.
Yes,
But small businesses too are the ones that those fruit juice manufacturers were saying that they buy their to get the best cost. Best value is to buy 12 months worth of stock, and then suddenly a change comes through and they're stuck with many tens of thousands of dollars worth of labels they've got to try and turf and then re-go out again.
And how do you determine the cost to industry? Is that by consulting with industry? Or...
We have done a modelling work which is relied on industry figures as well. So yes, we do ask industry for the cost of labelling change so that we can factor it in. But I believe in addition to that, we've done a piece of work. I don't know if you want to speak on that one, but specifically to best understand the costs of labelling changes and how do we make sure that we give sufficient time and we factor in that cost for the cost benefit.
And we've got a designated specialised team at Fazans that looks at the costs and benefits and consumer attitudes as well towards labelling changes and those sorts of things. So it's fairly well covered. And just another point I'll make, if I may, and it's around the types of information that need to go onto product labels or as part of QR codes. So we've got what needs to go in there in terms of the food standards, and then you've got a whole lot of additional information that may go on there. So from our perspective, we need to be really careful that it's only, that the essential information is included on there and that consumers can access and see that information and make some informed choices so they're not misled and they can make those really sensible choices when they're in supermarkets. So I know that in that QR space and that digital labelling space, there's a whole lot of additional information that people are thinking about, including on product labels, and so we need to just be very careful that that doesn't confuse consumers when they're going in and making these sorts of decisions.
So one of the things that food and beverages manufacturers have spoken about is the lack of harmonisation of labelling rules across Australia. Can you give me some examples of that? I'm just trying to imagine what that looks like.
Sorry, lack of harmonisation of labelling across Australia or internationally?
The question that I have says across Australia, but I thought that it would have been consistent across Australia.
Yeah, it should be consistent because the food standard codes apply equally across all jurisdictions.
Right, great.
I guess maybe what they're referring to is jurisdictional food regulators who are looking at compliance with label requirements, and maybe they're talking about that variation of that other information.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
I think the other thing to note is we're not the only ones that impose regulations on industry for food packaging. So there could be consumer laws that are imposed. So country of origin, labelling, etc. is not actually within the Food Standards Code. That's within food law. So it may be that there's that consistency across government regulations in this area. And I think from our perspective, we're keen to engage further in that space to make it a bit more seamless for industry in looking at the types of regulations that are going on and ensuring that there is that adequate period of time to update labels and minimise the cost burden.
And how do you intend to do that?
That's just communication across government and working better together. And so we work very closely with ACCC, Department of Ag, Department of Health and other areas to look at what's on the work plan and programs going forward and to see what we can do. But I think there is further work that we can do.
Yeah. Some people have spoken about, or food and beverages manufacturers have talked about consistent labelling around healthy choices and helping consumers make better decisions. And do you think that there's a way for us to do that without necessarily adding more regulatory complexity, or that the nature of that just means more? And do you have any views on having better labelling for healthy choices?
The Healthy Food Partnership is a pretty good topic to raise there, and that's where a group of public health, industry and minister chairs discussion amongst the group to figure out how can we improve the healthy food supply that we have for the country, and what is it that industry can do to really promote and help encourage healthy food consumption. With regards to improving healthy food labelling, there's opportunities to do voluntary conversations. You would know, though, that that's been part of the Health Star rating discussion that's been going on for a while. So there's opportunities, whether they be via regulation or voluntary means. Those conversations do exist, and I'm sure they'll continue. I didn't know if there's any in the other...
I think there's always perhaps room for improvement, but Fazan's perspective would be that we need to work with all stakeholders and in particular make sure the evidence base is robust for any changes that might be proposed in that area. It's already a complex space. Nutrition is complex, and trying to communicate that even more so. So I think Fazan's role is very much around what's the evidence base tell us in this space and how can we continue to use that evidence base to enhance that. And again, it's about informed consumers that we're really focused on what's the information that they could use better.
And also readability, I'm just going to put that out there as well.
Absolutely. Larger font size.
We've had a few people talk to us about the issues regarding the timeliness and costliness of dealing with Fazans, with applications. What do you think in that situation could be done to actually streamline or speed up these processes to help people out that are doing that to better support food and beverage manufacturing?
So there's a few items. Firstly, I'll mention, as mentioned before, Fazans is one of the faster regulators in the world, so I'll give credit to the team there and that they are doing a fantastic job. I'll also mention that we have a few application pathways, so for some products that companies want to apply to change the food standards code, there isn't a fee at all that needs to be paid. However, if it's for interest in getting an exclusive commercial capturable benefit, then there is a fee that needs to be paid, but that also means that we start the assessment right away. As far as what can be done to streamline, that's part of the conversation that's going on with the Fazans Act review, to understand is there more that can be done to more readily adopt international standards or at least consider international standards so that we can get approvals underway quicker.
And if I might just add, so we work really closely with potential applicants throughout the end-to-end process as well. So that starts when we're providing advice and guidance around what regulatory requirements are there in terms of the standard setting process, data requirements and those sorts of things. So quite often potential applicants will submit draft applications, will provide feedback, and that'll then, hopefully when it comes through, it means there's less stopping of the assessment if we need more information. And it's an entirely iterative process all the way through where we have those conversations with applicants. If we need new information or data, they're generally pretty happy to generate or provide that data and we go from there. And it's really only it's uncommon for us to miss our statutory timelines, but there are occasionally good reasons for doing that in terms of those data gaps, or if, in the case with some of the current ones, if the risk assessment is a little bit more complex than what we first anticipated. And I think also just differentiating the statutory process, which is locked in to a sequence of steps, and then sitting behind that is the risk analysis and the scientific assessment process. So there's lots of opportunities in that scientific assessment process to look at overseas assessment reports, to look at ways of streamlining. So, and we're already doing that now.
We've got one more. Just on organics. There seems to be confusion with organic food labelling between organic and certified organic, which also then creates issues for exports. What can we do to address that? Because I think the ability where people can put 1% of an organic product into a product and then go out and say, it's organic, when the rest, 99% of it's processed, whereas for certified organics, they've got to go through a pretty strict process to be able to get that tick off.
That's only for exports too, I think.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I think it's local too. They can still.
So interestingly enough, we don't regulate organics. That's actually a consumer values issue. So the ACCC and others, and for the export market, it's DAF that's responsible for organic labelling. We are protection of public health and safety, so it's not a safety issue. It's very much a consumer value issue. Sorry, hate saying it's not us. It's,
Anything else? No, you covered off most of it. Yeah. You beat us to the punch. Have you got any other comments you'd like to make or anything before we wrap up?
Thank you very much for having us, and I'll reiterate, we do have a free application pathway process, so if any industry members are interested in having changes to the code made, it is easiest and quickest if you just reach out to Fazan's, and we will talk you through what information you need to provide so that when you are ready to provide that information, we're good to go.
And if the committee has any further questions that come to mind, we're happy to take those on notice as well after this.
Oh, great. Terrific. Thank you. Well, that worked out well. So thank you very much. You'll receive a copy of the transcript to make any corrections to that transcription. I thank you for your time today and really appreciate it.
Thank you. See you then.
So we close the public hearing.